everybody. Welcome back to the Chasing Frets podcast. My name is Jason Shatter from Premier Guitar, and I'm here once again with Andy Ellis.
Hey, everyone.
So just the other day, we launched the podcast with Tommy Emmanuel. He's going to be our guest this week, and it was such an interesting time, Andy, to sit and just hear him just spew out knowledge about how he approaches solo guitar. That was such a fun talk with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have him back today to talk about one of his favorite topics, maybe his second favorite topic after talking about guitar in general, and that's Chet Atkins, which was a real important mentor to him. Yeah. And I know did you get to interview Chet Atkins ever back in the day, Andy?
No, I didn't interview Chet, but I had a guitar teaching studio on Music Row, and Chet, believe it or not, would sometimes stop by and visit.
Just to hang out? He just kind of strolled in?
Well, you see, where I had my office, upstairs from my office was a clothing designer who Judy's of Nashville, and she would make all the costumes for the country performers, and Chet would go get his clothes. Oh. So he would stop by on his way up or typically on his way back and poke his head in because I had a guitar teaching studio and a 4-track studio. Wow. And I played Chapman stick, and he would sometimes come by and ask me to play Chapman stick. So I've played Chapman stick for Chet Atkins.
Just to kind of, was he just like interested, like he was curious as to how you kind of did it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. And he's very generous. He is encouraging, was encouraging to someone like myself who was, just trying to make my way with music.
Right. Mm. Well, I think that theme carries over to the stories Tommy tells. And he also, if you aren't familiar with kind of the Chet Atkins style, he does even give some excellent recommendations for albums and songs to check out. So we're going to get right to that. Please make sure to subscribe and rate our podcast and leave a review wherever you can, wherever you're getting this. And if you have any feedback for us, questions or comments or concerns even, you can hit us up at chasingfrets@premierguitar.com. So well, let's get right to it. And here's Tommy talking all about Chet Atkins. Today's topic is one that I know is near and dear to your heart, and that is of kind of Chet Atkins' influence on you and some of your favorite recordings and albums that Chet has done. So first, tell me, Tommy, when did you and Chet first meet?
We met in person. The first time was 1980, back when I had hair and teeth. And I made my pilgrimage to the United States for the first time. I flew into Los Angeles, went to a friend's wedding, and then I went to see Elton John at the Hollywood Bowl. And then I flew out to Nashville to meet my childhood hero, meet the man who taught me that I had stolen so much from and been inspired by him, more than words can say. So I had written Chet a letter when I was 11 years old, and I sent it to him at RCA Records, and he wrote back and sent me a signed black and white photograph, and that was my treasure. Anyway, I got a letter from him when I was about 24 or 22 maybe, and someone had sent him a tape of me sitting in their lounge room playing just for fun for them, and he got it and he loved it, and he wrote back to say how impressed he was. Here's my office number, call me when you get to Nashville. So I knew something must have been up, because imagine all the people who copied him, who played his stuff really badly. It's just like it's unbearable to hear that kind of stuff. But anyway, I got his number. When I arrived in Nashville, I waited till the next morning, and they said he's normally at the office around 10 a.m. And I rang right on 1 minute past 10, and he answered the phone. And I said, I'm looking for Mr. Atkins. And he said, this is he. And I said, it's Tommy Emmanuel from Australia, thinking he won't have a clue who I am. He said, hey, Tommy, I've got your tape right here. I was just playing it for somebody. Where are you? And I said, I'm down the road in the Holiday Inn. He said, well, come on down. I'll see you right now. And I just about fainted. I got in my little rental car with my nylon string guitar, and I raced down to his office. And I'm sitting downstairs waiting, and his secretary rings him on the intercom, and I can hear his voice, and I know that voice. That's him, my hero. He comes down the stairs carrying a nylon string guitar, and there he is. You know, I've only ever seen him on the cover of his albums. I've never seen him on TV. We didn't have video in those days. I've never heard him other than the records. And he was so sweet. He really was. He came over to me, and I must have had teary eyes, you know, and I must have been trembling a little. And he just put me at ease straight away. And he talked really quietly, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he says, let's go in here and pick a little, you know. And we went into a side room with a like a conference desk and everything. And I went straight into me and Bobby McGee, which I stole from him anyway. And you know what he did? He didn't say anything. He just sat there and watched me for a while. And he was just like, an X-ray. He was X-raying everything I was doing. He was following me. And then he just joined in the chorus. He came in playing a harmony, and then he took a solo. You could have sworn that we'd been playing together all our lives. He made me sound like I really knew what I was doing.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that was the first time I met Chet.
And how old were you at this time?
About 22 or 23, something like that. Years later, I stayed in touch with him, and every now and again I'd write a song and I'd send it to him. And every time I called him, I'd say, hey, Chet, I've got this new song. And he'd say, can you hum it? Can you sing it? You know, he's making sure that whatever melody I'm writing, you better be able to sing it and remember it or put words to it, you know. And so, you know, unless you're as good as Jerry Reed was, where you can write something like Jerry's Breakdown and play a million notes, and every one of them is incredible. You know, I don't think I can do that. I can write a song that you can put words to, you know. And so, but anyway, I came to Nashville in 95, and I was part of a country music showcase for CMA Week. And so there were like 5 major artists from Australia, and I was the token instrumentalist. So all the other artists voted to put me on first, get me over with, so that they can come out and be glorified. You know, and so I rang Chet, and I told him that I was going to be playing first at this presentation at the Ace of Clubs. And he said, okay, I'll bring the Columbia folk down. He was signed with the Columbia label, which is Sony. And so he brought down, you know, half a dozen people from the record label, and it was a standing only gig, and they were right down the front. And these people didn't have a clue what I was about or what I was going to do. And I had a 15-minute set, and I came out and I threw everything I could at them. I hosed the crap out of them, and they went crazy. They yelled and screamed, and it was an amazing response. An American audience, what do you expect? Anyway, so after the show, Chet came back and said, boy, we were really underwhelmed, which means he liked it. And so we'd had the same thing the next night. We had the same showcase in the same club, and it was a different audience. Chet came down again and brought more people from Columbia, and they were really excited and enthusiastic and all that. And then the next day I had to leave and go back to Australia because I had some tour dates to do. And I got a call. When I got home a week after that, the phone rang, and it was Chet. And he said, very casually, he said, well, these Columbia people are very excited about you. He said, would you like to record together? And I said, you mean you and me? And he said, yeah, let's do an album together. He said, the last thing I'd done was an album with Mark Knopfler. And he said, would you like to do something together. And I almost, I don't know, I almost fell onto my knees, and I was so overwhelmed with emotion, but I kept it together. And he started then, he already had a plan. He'd been thinking about it. He said, I'm already writing songs for this album. I've got some ideas. I'm going to send you a tape. You start writing stuff and send me a tape, and away we go. We don't have to, if you've got a song that you've written that there's no co-write, that doesn't matter. Just send it to me, Mm-hmm. So I hung up the phone, and I was like, what just happened? What happened to my life? It's changed forever. And anyway, so I immediately picked up my guitar and I wrote Mr. Guitar, which was Chet's moniker, right? And I wrote it in about 10 minutes, and I rang him back, and I got my little daughter, she was 6 years old. I got her to stand there with the phone holding up to my guitar, and I said, Chief, I've written you a song. It's called Mr. Guitar. And I played it. So forth. And I had another couple of other songs, and I sent them to him on a tape, and he loved them all, and they all ended up on the album, including Waltzing Matilda, the Australian national anthem. And so I recorded that album, and that was my first Grammy nomination, was Chet's song Smoky Mountain Lullaby. I could talk all day and all night about that period because it was so brilliant, but I don't want to monopolize the time here.
Oh, that's why we're here. That's the whole reason.
That's right.
So when you were growing up, we talked about this briefly a little bit ago. When you were growing up, what were maybe some of the songs or albums that really resonated with you when you first started to dig into his music?
Okay. Well, what you got to remember is that in the 60s, the name on everybody's lips was Chet Atkins. 50s and 60s, he was like, he set the bar, and no one's ever gone past that bar. There are other people who've come along, like Leo Kottke and Doc Watson, Tony Rice, and people like that. But no one's ever set that incredible bar like Chet did. When he was young, he was a force of nature. His arranging skills were phenomenal. And his ideas were just brilliant. There was a little bit of Django, a bit of Les Paul, there was a bit of Barney Kessel, there was a bit of Jimmy Smith, there was a bit of Jerry Reed. There's a bit of everything in Chet's ideas, because he was such a great arranger and producer. What was I going to say? Okay, so some of his early works. The song that everybody discovered Chet Atkins with was and this. Sorry. Yeah, I made that mistake on purpose, by the way. Anyway,
of course.
So we'd all get together, and then of course Merle Travis's Cannonball Rag and 9 Pound Hammer, and then Doc came along with Deep River Blues. So everybody was trying to play all that stuff, So they're the kind of things. But then, of course, you'd hear the Best of Chet Atkins album, and he'd be playing two songs at once. He'd be going. So forth. And everybody's thinking, oh, that's a recording trick. And then you see him play it, and he does it, there was a lot of those kind of things. Some of the early works that he did of Jerry Reed's songs were brilliant. Stuff like this. Isn't that a gorgeous melody?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Nice change there at the end too. That nice
yeah,
little.
yeah. Isn't that cool? That's a Chet move, you know. And then there's a tune like this. Yeah, tunes like that. See, that's so melodic and so singable, and that's Chet and Boodle O'Brien who wrote all the Everly Brothers songs.
Mm.
Boodle O'Brien. So you know, and he had so many beautiful pieces, and then he'd do stuff like Mystery Train, but the Elvis Presley tune. So forth. Yeah, so, you know, I mean, he influenced me all my life. And if I go back and listen to his stuff now that I'm older and had a bit more experience, I can hear so much more in it because I've got something to listen with, you know, some experience, some tools, and some know what to listen for. And he's even better than I remember, you know.
Listening to you play, Tommy, and I can't stop moving in my chair and my seat, my foots, Andy, it's called feet. It's plural. My feet.
Your foots is moving.
My foots is moving, and in fact, I think that's probably accurate. You know, it's my foots is moving, and so I was thinking that this is one of the qualities of your playing that you can't sit still. And to the point where I was thinking, if my foot is moving, is this going to, you know, record? I don't want to, you know, mess up your playing.
You're welcome to my world. When I record, I have to be so careful.
You wear socks? You just like wear socks? Yep.
When the other day I was doing a worldwide kind of thing where we were talking, and then I'd play a bit, just like we're doing now. But it was for some site. Anyway, the guy asked me to play a bit of guitar boogie, and I got wailing on it, and I was like really getting into it, and I didn't realize how hard I was banging my foot on the floor. Well, the landlady here comes and knocks on my door, and she says, "Is everything all right?" And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because the guy downstairs thinks we're having an earthquake." Yeah, so, you know, if you nailed my foot to the ground, I couldn't play a note. I've got to be feeling every millisecond and every bit, you know. It's just the way it is. But, you know, this kind of thumb and finger style is great for really getting the groove in there. I think that's why we loved Jerry Reed when we first heard him, because there was nobody who sounded like him, you know. Have you ever heard his introduction to Georgia on My Mind? Check this out. Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through. just an old sweet song. Georgia on my mind. I never heard anybody do that. It's so piano.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love about it. And it's something that has influenced me as a writer and a player in a good way. Whenever I can make piano sounds on the guitar, it stops you sounding like every other guitar player.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm always looking for like a... You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so there's a lot more kind of gospel piano in that style, and that's what I love. That really grabs me straight away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, if there's a young, promising guitar student who maybe stumbled across your music and hears you talking so much about Chet and decides to go to dig backwards.
Well, you can hope for that. That's for sure.
It'll happen. I'm sure it's happened time and time again. It happened with me.
Even in places like Russia and China,
Yeah.
there are Chet Atkins, Merle Travis, and Jerry Reed disciples everywhere, and they all found them through coming to my shows.
Mm-hmm. Where would you, if you were to give them, maybe point them towards 2 or 3 records that you can say, here's a good place to start to kind of help them cut through? Because now it's like on your phone, you have anything, the history of recorded music available, you know.
Exactly.
Where would you curate to kind of point them, to guide them to what would be some good stuff to listen to?
Well, I think the first 2 albums that Chet did with Jerry Reed, me and Chet and me and Jerry, there's so much good playing and so many good ideas on those records. The album that Chet did with Merle Travis has some of Chet's finest playing. Like when he plays playing melody like that. See, there's many facets of Chet's style that have really influenced me. For instance, do you guys remember Los Indios Tabajaras?
Yeah.
You remember? So forth. That was a guy named Nato Lima, and he was from the jungles of Brazil, and him and his brother learned to play music through reading Chopin and Beethoven and all that sort of stuff in books. They taught themselves to play, and Chet signed them, and they had a big career going there back in the 60s. And Nato played the Del Vecchio resonator guitar and had that big singing vibrato. And he just stood out from everybody else, and Chet was so influenced by him. And so when you hear Chet playing melody like this, let's play. And he'd play stuff, that kind of stuff, and then things like that. That style came from there, and so it's a beautiful melodic thing. So now, if I do a show where John Knowles, one of the other CGPs, he plays nylon string and does the backing, and I'll play the melody. Say if we do. How Deep Is Your Love? So it's that melodic singing style of playing melody, and I got that directly from Chet, who got a lot of it from Django. So that's the kind of evolution. But yeah, his influence has been in many ways.
And you mentioned those 2 records with Jerry Reed. It seems like he had this real knack for finding, yourself included, finding the right guitar players to perform in duo. Because with Jerry and Mark Knopfler and yourself, it seems like those records in his catalog are like real standouts for guitar players.
Wow, thank you. I think a lot of his early work. There's an album that I really loved called Hometown Guitar. And that was, there's a photo of him standing near the station in Luttrell, which is the town where he was born in East Tennessee. And I never forgot that album. There's so many great songs on it and great arrangements. So then there was Solid Gold 69, Solid Gold 68. These are like big hits of the day. And then the early works, like stuff like Main Street Breakdown and Gallopin' Guitar, you can hear Django's influence on him. And it was because of his brother-in-law, Jethro Burns, the mandolin player. He was Chet's brother-in-law. Yeah, they married twin sisters.
Wow.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Somebody asked Jethro, how do you tell them apart? And he said, we try not to. But Main Street Breakdown. So you can tell it's Django influence. But Chet was like 19 years old when he wrote that song. Yeah. There's another one called Gallopin' Guitar. Has this cool little move in it. Check this out. So this is a B flat, and I'm going to flick off the 3rd string. And that's exactly how it ended. So Galloping Guitar. That was his first big kind of single. Came out in the late, like 49 or something like that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tommy, for spending some time today to talk about one of your heroes and mentors. And if people check out the description below, wherever you might find this, I'll make a Spotify playlist with anything that you mentioned that I can find that's out there, and I'll pilot there, so we'll have a one-stop shop to get some.
His version of Ave Maria is truly the Mona Lisa of all songs, all arrangements.
I can't wait to check that out. So thanks again, Tommy, Andy. And we'll be back on Friday with Tommy one more time to finish this first week of the podcast. And until then, we'll talk to you later.